How long have you been working with the plant medicines to get to the point where you could be doing international travel and then hop into a podcast? Do you ever need like real downtime, or is it just like clockwork now for you?
No, it's pretty much like clockwork. It's like anything else, that you get comfortable with. But yeah, no, I probably took like 4 or 5 years to get really comfortable in that way. Now it's just kind of a flow state where we go into the visionary realms in ceremony, and then, back to regular life and logistics and fly around. And actually tonight I'm hosting another plant medicine ceremony. So downtime isn't happening so much, but it's really beautiful. And I don't know, the plant support. So it's been actually really been great.
So I'd love to know a little bit of backstory before you got into this space. What was Hamilton like, and what was the trajectory to get you to where you are now?
That's kind of funny. Hamilton basically was like kind of a fairly normal person in that sense. Went to college, studied anthropology, played golf, and was actually the year after I graduated from college interested in pursuing professional golf. Ultimately, I had my own awakening that I've talked about on a lot of other shows. The awakening was spontaneous, and I just started having these extraordinary experiences. And, through the nature of those experiences, it brought me down to Peru. But I wasn't really looking for something that was so outside the box. I was just looking for something that could explain the experiences I was having and ultimately make sense around what was mystical and spiritual. And I found the plant medicines. I was basically guided into an ayahuasca apprenticeship. And through that apprenticeship, I never really left the aspects of my practice that really were grounded and kind of, based in what everyone would call collective or normal reality. I thought of things still in a pretty scientific way. And I was trying to find ways to be able to explain these phenomena that other people could understand if they had the experience, or they had the experience. So really, over the last 10 years, I've been trying to develop a lexicon and nomenclature that people can relate to, if they're coming from science or they're coming from a more religious background, or just kind of a more open spiritual place of exploration. It seems like there's so many differences and differentiation between the language people use that it makes it hard across culture and sort of across verticals to be able to really speak. And I've been trying to find ways to bridge that gap and make this something understandable, because the results people have from the experience are so incredible and so shared. So many people from all over the world have had these experiences now. They're really all kind of in the same genre. And now people try to talk about them and they have difficulty explaining that. So I try to simplify that as much as possible.
So when did Blue Morpho, which is your center in Iquitos, when was that founded?
So I founded Blue Morpho in 2002, and I founded it first as a jungle adventure tour business. So I was taking people that were coming from all over the world really deep into the forest. And so I was doing my apprenticeship at that time. And so I would use the location where I had built our base camp as a location of my apprenticeship. It was the first house I built at the age of 23 years old. And so our guests would go upriver than that, and I would stay at the retreat area at the base camp and continue my apprenticeship, be in ceremonies with the other teachers, and continue my dietas. And ultimately what happened is that our guests decided that they wanted to be a part of the plant medicine experiences more than going on the jungle treks. And so we started to include the guests in our plant medicine ceremonies, which really were local healing ceremonies, because the teachers that I worked with, or the maestros, were actual local healers who are practicing with indigenous communities and other locals along the rivers. And so we started to have these ceremonies where there was both healing of locals going on and the participation of our Western guests. And I thought what was so fascinating was that our Western guests started to also experience tremendous healing and benefit, which was ultimately written about and kind of got massive international publication back in 2006 and 2007. And so, Blue Morpho started in 2002. By 2005, 2006, we were working really with a predominantly international community, and really spreading it, plant medicine, and trying to teach about the positive uses of it.
You mentioned the locals coming to heal. The locals seem to view the medicine in maybe a bit more of a mundane way, or a day-to-day healing way. Did you find that to be true?
Yeah, it's based also in the culture. The people who come to plant medicine from other cultures have a mindset about it and a story about it, that it's about where drinking the ayahuasca and going somewhere else. And you got to kind of reverse that logic when you think about the way the local mythologies work. And so the locals come to plant medicine and they hear about all that same great mythology of everything going on out there, but it's really an idea that that out there is going to come to them. So they drink in the forest, they have illnesses, and their idea of medicine is that the spirit of the forest and the spirit of ayahuasca, which opens you up sort of to that great beyond, actually allows the fluid movement of energy to the ceremony itself. And that energy in the form also of different kinds of beings is going to come to the ceremony and actually perform healing on you. And it's those beings that are considered the doctors, and the master practitioners, the maestros or the medico vegetalistas are there to really facilitate that interaction between the doctors of the forest that come from the plants themselves and these other kinds of astral beings that can come in the visions that people have, come to the ceremony and actually provide this extraordinary kind of support and healing. Now, I know from a Western perspective that sounds, kind of out there. It's like, what do you mean these energies come to the ceremony and stuff like that? But you have to understand that for the Amazonian locals, that is their living mythology. Their idea is that the forest is completely alive. It's filled with beings. Their mythology is very advanced in that sense. There are these old grandfather figures that they see with these very long gray and white beards that supposedly walk around the forest. They say the rivers are enchanted, filled with mermaids. They say that there are these different kinds of gnomes and dwarf-like creatures running around the forest all the time. And so that's actually really quite normal for them. And so they do have this very mundane attitude about coming to ayahuasca ceremonies, that they're going to come, they're going to receive healing, it's going to come from the spirit, and that's actually really quite normal for them.
Westerners that would come in, the challenges that they would face would seem to floor them, and they were just like out there and moaning and groaning and really having like a lot of difficulty orienting to whatever was their process. Is that normal, or do they have similar kinds of difficulties with it?
I think both groups can have similar kinds of difficulties, but there's also a kind of experience where there's this idea of concentrating and going into kind of a deep inward meditative experience. And that concept is popular, and it's kind of known amongst the local people that that's what you do when you go into an ayahuasca ceremony. And it seems like the Westerners have also created a culture around kind of freaking out or thinking it gets too much for their ego. And I think the difference is that the local people understand that they're going to go into a deep communion with spirit. They're going to have visions, and it could become very strong. And as they do that, they go inward and they kind of anchor and ground within themselves. I have seen locals, start to scream and have those kinds of responses to the experience. But typically when they're cleansing really dark things for them, that would kind of produce a kind of mild psychosis anyway. I think the Westerners, though, typically have a much more fragile ego, and mind that in the visionary states can kind of go wild in that sense, have a much broader scope of thoughts that go through it, and that's just kind of an advent of being bottled up in the typical Western mind, and then finding this visionary experience, which opens the mind very, very quickly to things that are dramatically outside of the culture and the mythology of an individual. I mean, you have to put it into perspective that typically the ayahuasca experience for somebody from the Western world would be like the equivalent of all of a sudden finding yourself in a sci-fi movie, having it be completely real while 4th of July fireworks are going off in all directions, and fractal mathematics is kind of going not only through you, but everything you're looking at and seeing. So if you put sort of fireworks with fractals with some sci-fi movie all taking place at the same time, you could see why somebody who's used to rush hour traffic, who's like bottled up in a 9-to-5 world, would all of a sudden feel that that's such a dramatic change that it could produce a very dramatic physical and mental response.